Okay, so the two, you know, major areas for drawing creation and modification are the draw and modify panels here, and then the commands that are associated with them. But there's still a lot of other things um, to to modify your drawings and to organize them and make them look better, and tools to help you create the type of drawing you want to create. 3D notwithstanding, I'll get to that a different time. It's a different set of drawing and modifications tools. But for 2D, there are some other things. I guess core, if you would want to call it that, core tools. So I want to finish out the rest of the home tab. But instead of just going to the next section, I want to skip over annotation because I really want to focus on annotation when I cover viewports and paper space. Um, so I'm going to go through layers briefly. Now, there's a lot that can go along with layers, and I don't want to get too in depth. I want to have a dedicated video for layers. So I'm going to go through layers, blocks, the properties, probably layers, and then properties, object properties, including the properties window, and then creating blocks, and then just kind of looking at a few things, groups, which are similar to blocks, and a few things over here. So um, let's start off with layers first. Layers, I think I explained this in a previous video, that layers are a way to organize objects by giving them certain properties like color and line type and transparency and things like that. So I'm going to create a few different a few lines here, okay? And I'm going to actually, you know what? Let's just go ahead and make like a quick house. All it's usually easy. It's just in a lot of tutorials you'll see people drawing like houses first, just because they're familiar. It's easy to identify with the house, so you don't have to know any specific industry. You just know what a house is and what you're looking at, so it's easy to start with that. So I'm gonna draw a quick house. We'll just draw like real simple thing, 10 foot by 10 foot. Basically, it's a room. Um, Let me try this again. Are my units set up? Oh, I thought they saved it from the last time I was in this drawing. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that now that we're in correct units. There's my 10-foot room. I'm going to offset the walls 4 inches. I'm going to put a door opening right here, offset that 1'6" each way. Erase this one and trim between. Okay, I'm gonna do another rectangle for the door. Make that rectangle, we'll call it 2 inches wide by 3 foot long. Oops, did I do that right? Dimensions 2 by 3 foot. There we go. And then I'll put a circle here to this and trim the circle to these two things. That should cover that. Okay, so we have like a door, and let's say I want to put a couple of windows. Actually, we can do this, and then offset, I don't know, 2 feet for the windows. That sounds good. Okay. Put a break in here, break here, break here, and trim the line in between. So, and then we'll just make like another rectangle here. That's going to be 1 by the 4 foot. And then we'll move that, we'll center that up. And then I can copy this over to... By the way, if you don't see me clicking icons, it's because I'm using 2 key commands or command aliases. You can type in any command in AutoCAD, but these commands have command aliases. I will go over that in another video, maybe like a quick tip type video. Command aliases are extremely handy because you'll notice I'm not having to spend time looking for the icon or finding the icon, or even spending the time to make sure I hit the right icon. I'm just using one hand essentially to type in most of these commands. It's allowing me to work a lot faster. So, for example, you'll see me do a rotate command. Instead of doing typing in rotate, I'm just going to type in RO, which you can see the alias right there. And then I can rotate this window, turn my ortho on, and there we go. All right, so we've got a simple room. It's not even really a house, it's a room. We've got doors, walls, and windows, okay? So I'm going to, and by the way, everything I used to create this house is something I've already gone over in a previous video. So nothing here should be foreign. All the commands I used in this were rectangles, circle. I used trim command, line, offset, and that's pretty much it. Honestly, to create this, there's nothing too crazy about what I did here. But now I want to organize this because everything here is just on the 0 layer. Everything has the same object, color, and properties. So what I want to do is I want to open up the layer properties, and I want to create some layers to help me organize my objects. So I'm going to create a layer for walls. I'm going to create a layer for doors, and I'm going to create a layer for windows. The walls, I'll leave them white. The doors, I'll make yellow, and the windows, I'll make. Oh, here we go. Windows, I'll make red. You can use any colors you want. And so what I'll do is to put an object on a layer is actually very simple. Just select those objects, and in your layer drop down here, select the layer you want to put them on. You can see the color changing dynamically as I select the layer. Just select that layer, and that's it. Your object is now on that layer. This object is now on the Windows layer. You can see when I select that object, that rectangle, it puts in the properties. You know, it shows that that's the layer. If I select two objects that have different layers, this will just be blank because you can't show two layers at the same time here. Now these walls are still on the 0 layer. Actually, I'm gonna make, since the 0 layer is white, I'm gonna make my walls. We'll just say magenta. That's fine, I guess. So I'm gonna select all of my wall components, and I'm going to put them on the walls layer. Okay, and then the same thing with the door. I'm going to select my 2 door components here and put them on the doors layer. So now it's looking a bit more colorful, but as an added bonus, it's very easy to identify what's what. You'll notice that if I have this exact same thing right next to it and I turn everything white, sure, you know kind of what's what. You know what's, relatively speaking, what's a window and what's a door. But you know, what if you don't? What if you had like a brick ledge on the outside and you wanted to show that brick ledge, right? So we offset, I don't know, 4 inches, or we'll say 3 inches, just to give it a little bit different thickness. Let's say I wanted to offset this 3 inches. Okay, oops. And let's say I bring this in a couple inches and this a couple inches. Oops. I have my perpendicular snap turned off, and I want to turn that on so I don't have to type it in. So this can be a brick ledge, right? Or it can be a stone ledge. But you would know that if you put something like a stone layer and set that to cyan. By doing that, I can now know for future, or anybody else who accesses this drawing will know in the future that when they select that, oh, that's stone, that must be like stone ledge. Without that indicator, if these are both on layer 0, you would be like, well, what is this? It's like another wall on top of a wall. You can't tell these things. So some things are apparent, some things are not so apparent, and it helps to have layers to define them when you select them. And that goes back to good layer organization too. When you're creating layers, giving layers names that you can help you easily identify, or anybody who is in your drawing, help them easily identify what's going on as far as your layers go. If you've just got these things layer numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, well, that's, I mean, yeah, they'll show up as different colors with different properties, but it doesn't really tell you clearly what goes to what. So good layer naming convention helps. Okay, so now that we've got things created, what else can we do? Well, in the layers property, you can always go back and change the property of a particular aspect of that layer after the fact. Like let's say I want to change the windows for whatever reason to a dash line type. Okay, so and like I explained before, line types are like patterns or line patterns. So I'm gonna load in a dashed pattern because you have to load them into your drawing. Usually continuous is just your default line type. You have all kinds of line types you can pick from. So I'm gonna just choose dashed and say OK. And let's see. Ah, after you select it, after you load it, you have to actually select it. Say OK, and now you can see that the dash lines are there. Although the dash lines are small and there is a variable that can change that, it'll actually be over here in this area, but it's going to be the line type or the line type scale. So what happens is when you type in line type or LT for short, you can say show details, and you have what's called the global scale factor, and this just basically for all the lines with specialized patterns, it determines how large that pattern shows up. So if I change this global scale factor from a 1 to a 5 and say OK, you can see the dashes get bigger and more visible. So otherwise your dashes might be really tiny on a very big drawing, so it can help out that. Again, I can get into that a bit later for line types. But so like I said, when you go to your layer properties, you can adjust certain things. The two other major things, I won't get too far into this, but the two other major things is turning layers on and off. So let's say, and freezing them, which are very similar. And you're probably going to wonder what the difference is. I know it's a very common thing. You can turn layers on and off. So let's say I have the Windows layer here again. I can turn them on and off. Oh, I'm in the middle of a command. There we go. Okay. Turning the layer off hides every object that's on that layer. So if I just want to get rid of these, if I want to hide them temporarily while I'm working, I can just hide them. And it's great because now I don't have to worry about that being in my way. I can continue to work without it. Same goes for any other layers. I can turn the door layer off, the wall layer off. So, so this is your new, just briefly here on the layer tools. This is creating a new layer. This is creating, well, this is actually for viewports. I'll get into that later. You can delete a layer here, or you can make a layer current. So you can also just double click it. You don't have to use this tool. So let's say I want to make the door layer current. You can just double click it, and it makes it current. And what that means is that as I draw, any new object that I draw on will be on the door layer. Alternatively, you don't have to go through the layer manager to do that. You can do that from the drop-down list by just picking that layer, and it becomes your current active layer. That's the fastest way to do that. You can also quickly hide, turn your layers on and off from here. Well, that's my current layer. Let me put my current layer back to 0. Okay, it gives you a warning if my current layer is walls and I try to hide it, it's telling me that I'm trying to hide my current layer. So now I can turn it off from here. I can also freeze from here, which is the exact same thing. Shorthand, the difference between turning off and on versus freezing and thawing is that turning off a layer kind of still keeps it in the running memory, whereas freezing removes it. It's kind of like from the running memory, which frees up some processing power. Turning off layers doesn't do anything in terms of processing power, but freezing layers can. So if you have a drawing that's really big with a lot of objects and a lot of layers, freezing a lot of layers can make the whole drawing run faster. If your computer's getting some slowdown, freezing layers can help with that. Whereas turning off layers won't help with performance at all, but it will just hide the objects. So use those as you will. All right, so there's other functions that go along with layers, and I'll get into the whole layers thing in depth later on. But for beginners, that's basic layer creation and using it to organize your objects. So you also have what's called the properties. Now this is individual object properties. When you're in the layer manager, these properties here control any object that is on that layer. So as you saw, I put this object on the window layer, okay, and it changed the color to red and changed the line type to dashed, okay. So let's say I have, go to the walls layer, say I draw a rectangle, okay. It's assuming the properties of the walls layer, purple, continuous line type. Okay. What happens is here, I can change the individual properties of that object from the color to the line weight when it prints. Now, normally you can't see the line weight. There's an option to see it, but if you have that option turned off, you won't see that this thing is thicker. So I can choose a heavier line weight to print, but it will always look the same unless I turn a specialized option on, which I'll get to later on. I know I keep saying that a lot, but I don't want to overwhelm with too much information. A lot of this stuff there's a lot of options to consider. So you can change the default printing, you can change the printing line weight from the default to something heavier if you needed to. Or you can also give it its own line type. So I loaded in the dash line type, and I can make it dash. Now notice how we're still on the walls layer. This object is still technically on the walls layer, and if I turn off the walls layer, well, let me do this. Put my current layer as 0. If I turn off the walls layer, it turns off with it, despite the fact that it looks different, because it's still technically on that layer, but it happens to have a different color and it happens to have a different line type because I set those manually. If I want to set those back, I want to set this to by layer for both of these things, basically saying that I want the object's properties to be whatever the layer default is. Anytime you see by layer in for some particular property, whatever it is here or anywhere else you see by layer, it means use whatever the default setting is for that layer. So you can also match properties between two objects. This is great. So like, let's say I'm over here and I do another, 10 foot by 10 foot room, and I'm offsetting my 4 inches. And I want to put this on the layer of the wall layer. I can select it and go to the wall layer, or I can just hit match properties, select this object, and then select these objects. And it's saying we're picking a source object, and then we're saying I want you to match these to that. So this is our source, saying everything I select after I pick this, I want to match to that. So you'll select this, and then you enter. Actually, you don't hit enter. You select it just the one time, and then you go and select your other objects. It's all that. There is no. It's one of the few commands where there is no enter in between the two steps. For almost every command you're going to enter, you're going to hit the enter key or right click to move between the steps in the command. But with match properties, you click your source, and as soon as you see how right here it says match property, select source object. As soon as you click it, it goes to the next phase, and you just start doing your match properties on whatever that is. So whatever it matches the properties. So remember earlier we talked about how I can set the properties for this one to another color and another line type. If I match properties, it matches everything. Because really, you're not just saying I want this layer to be that layer. You're saying I want this object to match this object in every way possible. And that includes all the overrides, all the color overrides and the dash overrides. So that's going to be your match properties, which is honestly really, really common. I use match properties all the time because it's really easy to just say, when you have a long list of layers, maybe you've got, 60 layers. You don't want to go hunt it down because eventually this list, although you can see everything right here, this list will eventually stop right around here and you'll just start scrolling. You may even work for some companies where you'll have a layer list of 100, 200 drawings. 200 layers. And you don't want to have to go dig for that layer to put that object on that layer. It's so much easier to just say, you know what, I want this new object to match that object. I'm just going to match properties. So, all right, now we got groups. So this is actually a really good time to do this. So I'm gonna do a match properties and put this wall back to the way it was and erase this. So groups are exactly what they sound like. They are groups of objects, and it's really easy to make a group. Just select the group icon here, and the door. See, the door is two separate pieces. You can see when I hover over it, I've got this arc and I've got this rectangle. It'd be nice to make these things one object. So one of the ways you can do that is by making a group. And if I hover over it, you can see it's one object now. of course, I get grips that allow me to still modify the individual portions of that. I can still change the radius of this arc or a corner of this rectangle because these are just two objects that are in the same group but still editable after the fact. And if you want to ungroup them, just go to ungroup. So I'm going to click it, and actually you don't put a selection window, you just click the group. Oh, actually I already did ungroup it. Let's group this again. So group, and there it is. Now I got my two objects back. Okay, so you can do these two things. You can go into you don't really want to do group edit. Group editing is like if you want to add or remove stuff from a group. You can. If you want to add or remove stuff from a group, you can group these two things together and say, oh, I want to group edit, and then I want to add objects, and then like pick some objects you want to group with, and now they're all grouped together. But, you know, honestly, if it's just me personally, I think it's faster to just ungroup and regroup. But sometimes that's not always possible. Sometimes you need to be able to edit a group. That's how you edit it right there. When you select that group, you get options for that. So, and there is another option for like the group manager. This is for creating custom named groups and more options. I can go into that later on. But groups are really, really handy for that. So I'll make a few groups here. And by the way, just G is the short key for group. So you can just really quickly make some groups. So we got a group there, and looks like I grouped these two together by accident. That's still a group. There we go. So you can actually double up on groups. These are each individually groups, but you can group again. And actually, really, you just have to select a portion of the two groups. And notice how they both highlight. And now these are both part of one group. And if I go ungroup them, it's saying object is a member of more than one group. Just say except when you're ungrouping. Let's see here. And we still get our individual groups here, which you can further ungroup into the individual objects. So, all right, now along the lines with grouping, there is blocks. Again, blocks, man, a lot can be said about blocks. They are very, very powerful. At their core, simply putting, a block is like a group. It is a collection of objects, only you cannot edit that group of objects from like the outside, and you'll see what I mean by that. You have to go into what's called a block editor to edit the objects. So let's say I want to block this door. Okay, let's say I don't want somebody to accidentally come in and grab a grip and mess this door up. I want it to stay as one object fixed all the time. What you can do is I'm going to ungroup this. You can block it. So you'll see insert here. This is for blocks that already exist in your drawing, but we don't have any blocks in this drawing yet. So we're not going to be able to insert anything just yet. So we're going to create a block. Okay. And there's a lot of options here. You know, every time one of these windows comes up, it seems like there's a lot of options. But when you break it down, there's not too many. The main constituents of block creation that you need to be concerned with is naming it. So I'm going to name this block door. The insertion point, because later on we can insert new copies of this block, and if we insert new copies, what's going to be like the point where you insert it from? So the point I want to insert this door from is probably going to be here, because if I create a new door opening, I want to be able to insert it from this point right here. Okay, and then I'm going to select my objects, which is my arc and my rectangle. You can just do a selection window if you want to. All right, so we've got everything we need. You have a couple options here. You can say you retain. It'll make the block for you, but it'll save the block for you, but it leaves the objects untouched. So these objects will stay the way they are. Or you can also convert these objects to a block, or you can delete them if you just hate them, I guess. But I'm going to say convert to block. That way this actually gets converted to a block after the fact. Now I've got one grip, and the only thing this grip does is allow me to move the block. So what makes this different from groups is that I could copy this if I wanted to make another copy of it, but I can also insert. And now that I'm able to insert, I can see the blocks that I have available to me. Or you can click more options and it brings you to this one. So, I'm just going to say insert door, and there's my door. And you can see where it's inserting it from. So let's erase this. Okay, and let's bring this in 6 inches and this 6 inches and say I want to make this a door opening. So I hit insert, click my door, and I'm going to put it right here on the corner, and it's inserted. Of course, now I have to manually rotate, right? So I say rotate, and it's rotated. Alternatively, as you're inserting, you get options: base point, scale, XYZ. These are like offsets, and then rotate. And you can choose the rotation angle. I'm going to say 90 degrees because that's what I was going to rotate it last time. So now it's already rotated for me, and so when I place it, I'm good to go. So, and now because there's no grips to edit, nobody can accidentally edit this block. I can reuse this block over and over again, and not have to worry about myself or anybody else messing up this block. So that's pretty much all of it for here. Lastly is measure, and this is really, I mean, pretty simplistic. I mean, there's a few of these I can go over. I'm going to go over all the stuff individually in more detail, but when you're looking for a quick distance, measure is the way to do it. It's just distance, the distance command, and you pick one point, you pick another point, and it just gives you the distance of what you measured. It gives you the delta x, the total distance, the x, the y, and the z. Because, like, for example, if I'm measuring from this corner to this corner, it gives me the total distance, which is the actual distance between the two. And it also gives me the x and the y, and there was no z. So, and that's it. That's it for pretty much the remainder of this on the Home tab. Coming up, I'm going to go over some things like external references and viewport creation and things of that nature. So.